This is a pre-recorded presentation on the topic of zoning changes for 4707 Circle Down for the June 12th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting. For this item, the applicant is the City of Golden Valley, which is seeking 3 related entitlements in order to redevelop a vacant portion of right-of-way into a single-family lot as part of its homeownership program for equity. Firstly, this would require amending the future land use map for the property to guide it to low-density residential. Secondly, to amend the zoning map to zone the property to single-family residential, or R-1. And finally, to review and approve the preliminary plat that would create a parcel boundary through the active subdivision. The property itself is located in the North Tyrol neighborhood in the southeast corner of the city, located just north of Interstate 394 and east of Highway 100. As can be seen on the city's future land use map, there is currently no guided land use for this property, but it is otherwise adjacent to a number of properties guided for low-density residential and for institutional park uses further to the east with North Tyrol Park. Similarly, as platted right-of-way, this property has no zoning designation currently. Here we have a 2021 aerial photograph of the property and the surrounding neighborhood, showing some of the existing conditions and vegetation on the site. The property was originally platted in 1965 as part of the Moshu Edition, but was soon after acquired by MnDOT to function as right-of-way for a nearby highway project expanding Interstate 394 and create a connection to Highway 100. The unutilized and underdeveloped portion of that right-of-way was then later turned back to the city by MnDOT and has since been considered platted right-of-way but underused by the city. After the replatting process, this would be a single parcel of 39,578 square feet in area that would front both on Circle Down as well as Natchez Avenue South. The existing drainage and utility easements from the original plat would be vacated as part of this process, and new easements would be dedicated along property boundaries. And additionally, an easement would be dedicated over an existing storm sewer pipe that runs through the property. There are large numbers of mature trees across the property and as well along both of the two streets, as well as a large amount of vegetation deeper into the lot along the sound wall for the highway. Similarly, close to that sound wall area, there are some areas of steep topography that would otherwise not be used for building footprint. To those last 2 points, you can see here on this diagram in the aerial photograph, the green lines being a underground storm sewer infrastructure, a pipe in this case, that would then have a new easement dedicated over it. And then the red lines showing 2-foot intervals showing change in grade, indicating that's increasing grade as you move closer to the highway on-ramp. Here we have a view of the site when viewed from the cul-de-sac at the end of Natchez Avenue South. A view from the corner of Natchez and Circle Down, and finally a view from Circle Down facing towards Natchez. The proposal for this lot is guided by the action of the City Council in spring of 2022, identifying this and 2 other properties for the first round of HOPE, the Homeownership Program for Equity. This is a program that targets city-controlled parcels and sites throughout the city to develop homes affordable to households making 60 to 80% area median income. After the entitlements would be finalized, the site would then be transferred to Greater Metropolitan Housing Corporation, who was selected to be the development partner for a single-family home on this site. The redevelopment would require new utility connections to city facilities located in the existing right-of-way. Additionally, tree protection and replacement standards would apply for the redevelopment, and any trees not preserved through construction would need to be replaced, subject to our standards. Finally, given the existing stormwater infrastructure on the site and the desire to mitigate highway impacts, staff expects that this home would be located closer to the northeast portion of the lot than elsewhere on the parcel. Here you can see the preliminary plat for this new parcel to be created as 4707 Circle Down. Highlighted in gray are the vacated drainage and utility easements from the original Moshu Edition plat that were between smaller properties here. The green line is the new stormwater easement over that existing pipe. And then finally, highlighted in gold is the anticipated building area for a new home that takes into account both that new stormwater easement as well as the 35-foot setbacks from both streets. As mentioned, there are 3 actions that would need to be taken by the Planning Commission in terms of their recommendation. Starting first with the land use map amendment. This would be going from no designation in the comprehensive plan to a designation of low density residential by staff's proposal. There are no specific standards within City Code to evaluate a land use map amendment, although typically the Planning Commission and City Council consider the land use descriptions themselves, the impacts to surrounding areas, and the consistency with broader comp plan goals and objectives. The low-density residential land use is described as a category including primarily single-family detached units, but may include single-family and two-family attached units in scattered locations as appropriate. This land use should be surrounded by other land uses with minimal impacts, such as institutional and open space. In considering the surrounding area, as noted previously, the surrounding properties are largely already guided for the same low-density residential classification, and as such, this would not be out of place in the neighborhood itself. Things to note in terms of other impacts from a redevelopment: significant trees, as mentioned, that could not be preserved through construction would need to be replaced according to the requirements of Section 111-7 of City Code. And additionally, the anticipated building area should mean that vegetation and grading around the sound wall would not need to be modified from how it exists today. Finally, city staff finds that a single additional home would not impact traffic patterns locally to a significant extent. Finally, for consideration is consistency with the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan. Staff has highlighted a few examples here from that 2040 plan, including Land Use Goal 3, to promote high-quality development, ensure new development meets high construction and visual quality standards, and includes measures of sustainability, and with the sub-objectives of encouraging developments to respect their surroundings and to recognize and support development patterns that acknowledge the character of suburban neighborhoods. Also, Land Use Goal 4, to prepare for targeted redevelopment, use public and private redevelopment opportunities to advance the city's future land use map and policies. From the housing chapter, Goal 3 highlights increasing housing affordability, increase housing opportunities at a cost that low and moderate income households can afford without compromising their ability to pay for other essential needs, with the sub-objectives of supporting the production of new, high-quality, affordable housing in the city, to identify sites in Golden Valley and adopt land use policies that enable the city to meet the Metropolitan Council's affordable housing allocation requirement, and finally, to support long-term affordability of single-family homes through homeownership programs and the community land trust model. Moving to the zoning map amendment, similarly to land use, this is currently unzoned right-of-way and would be going to single-family residential zoning. There are no specific standards, again, to evaluate a zoning map amendment, but typically the city has looked at the purposes of the zoning districts, the lists of permitted uses within those districts, the compatibility with surrounding areas, and consistency with comprehensive plan goals. The purpose of the Golden Valley Zoning Code is to regulate land use within the city, including the location, size, use, and height of buildings, the arrangement of buildings on lots, and the density of population within the city for the purpose of promoting the health, safety, order, convenience, and general welfare of all citizens of the city. In terms of the specific zoning district, the purpose of single-family residential zoning is to provide for detached single-family dwelling units at a low density, along with directly related and complementary uses. In looking at the permitted uses allowed in the R1 zoning district, R1 does allow for single-family homes, foster family homes, and residential facilities serving 6 or fewer persons by right. Staff will note here that the city, as the property owner, seeks only to see this property developed as an affordable single-family home, rather than any of those other mentioned permitted uses. In examining the compatibility with surrounding areas, staff will note that the general local context of this neighborhood supports a rezoning to single-family residential, as this would mesh with most of the other surrounding properties nearby. And then there is also available parkland just to the east in the form of North Tyrol Park. Secondly, we will note that while this is adjacent to an existing highway, the buffer of vegetation and slope that exists would be maintained to help mitigate impacts on the future homeowners, and certainly that there are opportunities to work with Greater Metropolitan Housing Corporation, the builder in this case, to further plan for that adjacent highway use. Staff will not completely go through all of the same goals and objectives from the land use and housing chapters of the comprehensive plan here, as we mentioned for the land use chapter, but generally staff feels that these same goals and objectives are being met by rezoning the property to single-family residential. To summarize staff's findings on the topics of zoning and land use before any subdivision discussion, staff finds that the proposed single-family classification is consistent with the surrounding neighborhood, that the proposed use would help to achieve a number of goals from the comprehensive plan, that the parcel is no longer needed by MnDOT for highway purposes and has no anticipated use within city park or public works governmental services, and finally, that utilizing the land for affordable home ownership as part of HOPE would benefit the city's variety of housing opportunities. The final entitlement up for consideration tonight is the minor subdivision or consolidation of the property into a single parcel. Again, currently this is platted right-of-way controlled by the city, but would need to be replatted as a parcel in order to be developed. This process would include the vacation of existing 1960s easements between the old property lines, as well as the dedication of new property boundary easements of 10 feet off of all exterior property boundaries. One note here is that our engineering staff do have some corrections to be made between the preliminary and final plat review at City Council in order to ensure that our future needs for street right-of-way are met. Again, those would take place likely between preliminary and final plat drafting and are a condition of the staff's recommendation in the case of this minor subdivision. Finally, as with all subdivisions, this action would need to meet the standards outlined in section 109-121 of our subdivision code. Under the City of Golden Valley subdivision code, this action would be considered a minor subdivision or minor consolidation. There are three aspects of eligibility in order to be considered a minor subdivision or consolidation. First, the land needs to be part of a recorded plat or recorded registered land survey. This was originally part of the Moshu edition. The consolidations may involve any number of parcels, but subdivisions shall be limited to the creation of 4 or fewer lots from 1 or more original parcels. In this case, only 1 parcel is being created. And then finally, that the subdivision or consolidation shall not necessitate any additional public investment in new roads or utilities to serve the lots. In this case, the parcel will have utility connections that can be provided from underground utilities in either Natchez or Circle Down. A principal area of consideration for any subdivision is whether the lots being created would meet the requirements of the zoning district they would fall under. For this example, staff is utilizing the R1 zoning district's lot requirements for a new buildable lot. In that case, there are 3 areas that apply here, one being the minimum lot area. Given that there are 13 R1 zoned properties within 250 feet of this parcel that average over 18,000 square feet, a higher area requirement of 15,000 square feet as opposed to the typical 10,000 is required. Here, the proposed new parcel would be 39,578 square feet, meeting this area requirement. Secondly, for corner lots, a new corner lot is required to have 100 feet of width. In this case, that standard is exceeded from either Circle Down or Natchez Avenue South. And then finally, for lot depth, City requires that 70 feet of depth from the front property line be provided at a width of at least 100 feet or more. In this case, the standard is again met, regardless of if that measurement is taken from Circle Down or from Natchez. Engineering staff have had a chance to review the preliminary plat, and as noted, will have changes in mind for that final plat to be provided by the external surveyor that was utilized. Primarily, this would be to address some changes in the area around the cul-de-sac that is shown in the preliminary plat as part of that property being created. Whether this area is converted back into right-of-way or if it is covered through a overlaying easement, in both cases, it would not impact the proposed parcel meeting those pre-mentioned lot requirements. Secondarily, engineering did request that easement over the existing storm sewer pipe and are satisfied with the dimensions provided in the preliminary plat. They also did not raise any concerns over excessive wetness or floodplain on this site, and note that the steeper topography towards the rear of the lot would not make it overall unbuildable. Finally, we'll note that there were no comments or concerns from the fire department or building inspections departments at this time, although they will certainly be involved in a building permit review further down the road. There are a total of 8 factors that must be met in order to qualify as a minor consolidation and to move forward with approval. Firstly, the approval would be denied if the minimum area and dimensional requirements were not met by the new lot, or if no access from an abutting improved street was provided. In this case, the standard is met and the new lot exceeds dimensional requirements and has vehicular access from either city street. Secondly, it may be denied if the new lot is encumbered by steep slopes or excessive wetness. In this case, the standard is also met. There are no excessive wetness concerns, and where there are steep slopes on the property, they would not inhibit building on other portions. Thirdly, the action may be denied if sewer and water connections are not accessible for the new property. Again, there are existing city services within both Natchez Avenue and Circle Down. Any private connections would not be at any cost to the city that would be installed. Fourthly, the approval shall be conditioned on the granting of public easements. This standard is conditionally met. As noted, there are some adjustments being requested by our engineering staff to the easements shown on the preliminary plat. Fifthly, a subdivision approval can be conditioned on the requirements of other public agencies that might be impacted by the division. In this case, there were no applicable agencies impacted. Sixth, it shall be conditioned on title review by the city attorney. As with most of our subdivision and consolidation actions, the city attorney will determine if such a title review is necessary prior to approval of the final plat. Seventh, any subdivision or consolidation is conditioned on the payment of park dedication, sewer and water access charges, or pending or levied assessments. In this case, city will determine SAC and WAC fees for proposed redevelopment as part of a process with Metropolitan Council and in line with our building permit process. As of this time, there are no pending or levied deferred assessments on the property. And finally, these conditions will provide the only basis for a denial. Approval will be granted to any application that meets the established conditions. Again, staff feels that these 8 conditions have been met by the proposed subdivision with the 2 conditional items that are relating to easements and title review. Moving to staff's recommended actions. In the case of 4707 Circle Down, there are 3 items to be voted on by the Planning Commission. In all 3 cases of the requested amendment to the future land use map, the requested amendment to the zoning map, and in terms of the minor subdivision preliminary plat, staff is recommending approval of all 3 items, with the note here that there are 2 conditions on the approval of the minor subdivision. Firstly, that the applicant shall modify the final plat to accommodate corrections from city engineering staff, and that the city attorney will determine if a title review is necessary prior to the approval of the final plat.